What would you do if a little girl handed you a note mid-flight that changed everything? This heart-stopping story of bravery, survival, and justice will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories, and let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from viewers around the world. The airport was buzzing with its usual chaos, announcements echoing over the intercom, passengers rushing to their gates, and children clinging to their parents as they navigated the terminals. Among the crowd was 12-year-old Maya, sitting quietly in the waiting area for her flight. She clutched a small notebook and her backpack tightly, her eyes darting around the room nervously. She was traveling alone, her ticket marked unaccompanied minor. To an outsider, she might have seemed like any other young girl flying solo, but Maya's demeanor told a different story. Her shoulders were tense, her hands trembled slightly, and her gaze was filled with unease. When boarding was announced, Maya hesitated before rising to join the line. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the crowd as if expecting someone to appear. With a deep breath, she handed her ticket to the gate agent and stepped onto the plane. Maya was assigned a window seat in the middle of the economy section. She slid into her seat, placing her backpack on her lap like a shield. Around her, passengers settled in, chatting, adjusting bags, and finding their headphones. Maya kept her head low, avoiding eye contact with anyone. A flight attendant named Rachel soon approached. She was in her early 30s, with a warm smile and a calm demeanor that put even the most nervous passengers at ease. She immediately noticed Maya's small frame and the anxious way she clung to her bag. "Hi there, sweetheart," Rachel said softly, crouching down to Maya's level. "I'm Rachel, one of the flight attendants. Are you flying alone today?" Maya nodded but didn't speak. "That's all right," Rachel continued, her tone kind and reassuring. "I'll be checking on you throughout the flight, okay? If you need anything at all, just press this button." She pointed to the call button above Maya's seat. "Okay," Maya murmured, her voice barely audible. Rachel gave her a smile and patted her arm gently before moving down the aisle. As the plane took off, Maya stared out the window, her expression unreadable. She fidgeted with the zipper of her backpack, glancing nervously at the man sitting in the row ahead of her. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a leather jacket. Maya quickly looked away whenever he shifted in his seat, but her discomfort was clear. Rachel, making her rounds through the cabin, noticed Maya's unease. During the drink service, she leaned down to check on her again. "How are you holding up, honey?" Rachel asked. Maya hesitated, her eyes darting to the man in front of her and back to Rachel. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly shook her head. "I'm fine," she whispered. Rachel frowned but decided not to press further. "Okay. If you need me, remember, I'm right here." About an hour into the flight, as passengers settled into their books, movies, or naps, Rachel noticed Maya shifting in her seat. The girl reached into her notebook and tore out a small piece of paper. Her hands shook as she wrote something, folded the paper, and held it tightly in her fist. Moments later, Maya pressed the call button. Rachel arrived quickly, her usual cheerful demeanor in place. "What can I do for you, Maya?" she asked. Maya looked around nervously, her eyes flickering to the man in the row ahead before settling on Rachel. Slowly, she held out the folded note. "Please," she whispered. "Just read it." Rachel's smile faltered slightly as she took the note. She unfolded it and scanned the words. Her face turned pale, and her breath caught in her throat. The note read, "Help me. I've been taken." For a moment, Rachel froze, the weight of the words sinking in. Her eyes flicked back to Maya, who was now staring at her with wide, pleading eyes. Rachel quickly folded the note and slipped it into her pocket. Forcing a calm expression, she knelt down beside Maya. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "Stay calm, and don't say anything. I'll take care of this." As Rachel rose and walked briskly toward the galley, her mind raced. The girl's note, the fear in her eyes, and the man's suspicious glances all pointed to something far more sinister than a routine flight. She needed to act fast. Before it was too late, Rachel stood in the galley, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Her heart was pounding, and the words from Maya's note echoed in her mind, "Help me. I've been taken." She had encountered panicked passengers, medical emergencies, and turbulence in her years as a flight attendant, but nothing had prepared her for this. Taking a deep breath, Rachel reached for the intercom phone and called the lead flight attendant, Grace, to join her. Within moments, Grace appeared, her professional demeanor masking any sign of alarm. Rachel handed her the note without saying a word. Grace's expression shifted from confusion to horror as she read it. "Do you think it's real?" Grace asked, her voice low but urgent. Rachel nodded. "It has to be. Did you see the way she looked at me? And the man sitting near her, he keeps watching her. Something's wrong, Grace." Grace pursed her lips. "We need to act fast, but we can't let anyone suspect anything. Let me alert the captain. He'll contact the authorities and decide the best course of action." Grace disappeared into the cockpit, leaving Rachel alone in the galley. Minutes later, Grace returned with a determined look. "The captain is contacting air traffic control. We're going to make an emergency landing, but he's disguising it as a mechanical issue to avoid alarming the passengers." Rachel nodded, relief washing over her. "What should I do in the meantime? I don't want her to panic, but I also don't want him to realize we're onto him." "Keep an eye on both of them," Grace instructed. "Make sure she knows we're here for her, but don't make him suspicious. The authorities will be waiting for us when we land." Rachel composed herself and returned to the cabin. As she walked past Maya's row, she felt the man's eyes on her, sharp and probing. He sat just one row ahead of Maya, slightly angled so he could glance back at her without it being obvious. His posture was tense, his hands resting on his knees, and his gaze flickered between Maya and Rachel. Rachel forced a polite smile as she passed, masking her unease. She stopped by Maya's seat and knelt down. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Maya's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded faintly. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on Maya's arm. "You're very brave," she said quietly. "We're going to help you, I promise." Maya's lip quivered, but she held back her tears, giving Rachel a small, grateful nod. Rachel rose and continued down the aisle, her mind racing with scenarios and strategies. Rachel discreetly informed another flight attendant, Jason, about the situation. Together, they devised a plan to subtly monitor the man. Jason positioned himself near the galley, where he had a clear view of the suspect, while Rachel continued her rounds, carefully observing both Maya and the man. The suspect's behavior only heightened Rachel's suspicions. He seemed restless, shifting in his seat and glancing around the cabin. At one point, he leaned toward Maya, speaking to her in a low, firm tone. Rachel couldn't hear what he said, but she noticed Maya's body stiffen and her eyes dart away. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a minor mechanical issue, we'll be making an unscheduled landing at the nearest airport. There's no need to worry, and we appreciate your cooperation. Our flight attendants will keep you informed as we proceed." The announcement rippled through the cabin, eliciting murmurs and confused expressions from the passengers. Rachel glanced at Maya, who looked up at her with a mixture of hope and fear. The man, however, appeared tense, his jaw tightening as he shifted in his seat. As the plane began its descent, Rachel and Grace moved discreetly through the cabin, preparing the passengers for the landing. When Rachel passed Maya's seat again, she gave her a reassuring smile and a subtle nod. Maya seemed to understand, her small hands gripping the armrests tightly. In the galley, Jason approached Rachel. "He knows something's up," Jason whispered, glancing toward the suspect. "He's getting antsy." "We just need to keep him calm until we land," Rachel said. "Once we're on the ground, it's out of our hands." Jason nodded, his expression grim. "Let's hope we make it in time." The plane touched down smoothly, and the passengers applauded out of habit, unaware of the tense undercurrent in the cabin. Rachel's pulse quickened as the aircraft taxied toward the terminal. Outside, she could see police vehicles and flashing lights waiting on the tarmac. As the plane came to a stop, the captain announced, "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be deplaning shortly." Rachel exchanged a glance with Grace, both of them bracing for what was about to unfold. The authorities were here, and Maya's nightmare was one step closer to ending. The plane had landed, but the tension in the cabin remained thick as passengers stayed seated, oblivious to the real reason behind the unscheduled landing. Rachel lingered near Maya's seat, her heart pounding as she waited for the police to board. The suspect sat one row ahead, his body rigid, his eyes darting toward the exit. Rachel could sense his growing unease, but she kept her expression calm. She leaned down toward Maya, speaking softly. "We're on the ground now. Everything's going to be okay. Just stay calm, all right?" Maya nodded faintly, but her wide eyes betrayed her fear. Rachel noticed how tightly the young girl clutched her backpack, as if it were the only thing grounding her. Rachel crouched lower, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maya, can you tell me what's going on? Who is that man? Is he the one who took you?" Maya hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the man in front of her. Her hands trembled as she opened her mouth to speak but stopped, shaking her head. Tears welled in her eyes. Rachel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," she said. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you." Maya took a shaky breath. He told me I had to go with him," she whispered. "He said he was my mom's friend, but he lied. My mom's not here, and he won't tell me where she is." Rachel's stomach churned. "When did this happen?" she asked. 2 weeks ago, Maya said, her voice breaking. "He came to my school. He said my mom was hurt and needed me. I didn't know he was lying." Rachel's heart ached for the girl. "What happened after that?" she pressed gently. "He took me to his house," Maya continued, tears streaming down her face. "There were other people there. They kept talking about selling me to someone. I heard them say I was valuable." She sniffled, her small frame trembling. "I got scared, so I wrote the note. I thought maybe someone would help me." Rachel's mind raced as she pieced together Maya's story. She glanced toward the suspect, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat, his foot tapping rapidly against the floor. His behavior only reinforced Maya's claims. Rachel's hands curled into fists at the thought of what this man had put Maya through. But she forced herself to stay composed. "You did the right thing by giving me that note," she told Maya. "We're going to make sure you're safe." Maya wiped her tears, nodding hesitantly. "He said, if I told anyone, he'd find me. No matter where I go." Rachel felt a surge of anger but kept her voice steady. "He's not going to hurt you anymore," she promised. "We're here to protect you." The sound of footsteps echoed through the cabin as police officers boarded the plane. Rachel stood, her heart pounding, as they approached. She quickly gestured toward the man in the front row. "That's him," she whispered. "He's the one." The lead officer nodded, his expression grim. Rachel watched as they moved toward the suspect, who stiffened as the officers approached. His eyes darted toward the exits, and for a moment, Rachel thought he might try to run. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of the officers said firmly. The man's face twisted with feigned confusion. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice rising. I haven't done anything wrong. Maya sank lower in her seat, clutching her backpack tightly. Rachel placed a protective hand on her shoulder, shielding her from view as the officers escorted the man off the plane. As the suspect was led away in handcuffs, the tension in Rachel's chest began to ease. She knelt beside Maya once more, her voice soft. He's gone now. You're safe. Maya looked up at her, her tear-streaked face a mix of fear and relief. What happens now? She asked, her voice trembling. Rachel smiled gently. Now, we get you back to your mom. The words brought a flicker of hope to Maya's eyes, but Rachel knew the journey wasn't over yet. There were still questions to answer and challenges to face, but for now, Maya was one step closer to safety. The plane had landed, but for Rachel, the ordeal was far from over. She stayed close to Maya, her protective instincts kicking in. The girl sat curled in her seat, her small frame trembling as she clung to her backpack. Rachel could see the fear etched on Maya's face, and she knew the presence of the police outside wouldn't erase the trauma she had endured. The air in the cabin was thick with tension, passengers murmuring about the mechanical issue that had forced the emergency landing. Rachel leaned down next to Maya, speaking softly. Maya, we're going to get off the plane soon. The police are here, and they'll take care of everything. You're safe now, okay? Maya nodded faintly but didn't lift her eyes. Her hands gripped the straps of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned white. What if he finds me again? She whispered. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He won't. The police are going to make sure of that. And so will I. Maya's lip quivered, but she gave a small nod. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a step toward believing that someone cared enough to protect her. A uniformed officer stepped onto the plane, his presence immediately commanding attention. Rachel straightened and signaled to him. He approached with a calm but purposeful demeanor. This is Maya, Rachel said softly. She's the one who gave me the note. The officer crouched down to Maya's level, his voice gentle. Hi, Maya. My name is Officer Daniels. I'm here to help you, okay? You're very brave for speaking up. Maya's eyes darted to Rachel, who nodded in encouragement. You can trust him, Rachel said. Slowly, Maya loosened her grip on her backpack and allowed Officer Daniels to guide her out of her seat. As they made their way toward the front of the plane, Rachel walked beside Maya, her presence a quiet shield. Passengers turned to watch, their curiosity evident, but Rachel ignored them. This moment wasn't about anyone else, it was about getting Maya to safety. At the front of the plane, two other officers were waiting with the suspect. Greg's hands were now cuffed behind his back, and his face was a mixture of anger and defiance. As Maya approached, he glared at her, his voice low and venomous. You shouldn't have said anything, he hissed. Maya froze, her breath hitching, but Rachel stepped forward, her voice sharp. Enough, she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. You've done enough damage. The officers pulled Greg away, their firm grip silencing him as they led him off the plane. Maya clung to Rachel's side, tears streaming down her face. I was so scared, she whispered. You're safe now, Rachel said firmly. He can't hurt you anymore. The terminal was a flurry of activity as police and airport security worked together to secure the area. Rachel stayed with Maya as Officer Daniels led them to a private room away from the chaos. Maya sank into a chair, her small body visibly exhausted from the ordeal. Officer Daniels crouched in front of her again. Maya, we need to ask you some questions so we can understand what happened. Can you tell us about the man who took you? Maya hesitated, her fingers twisting the strap of her backpack. His name is Greg, she said softly. He came to my school and said my mom was hurt. He said she sent him to pick me up. Rachel's heart ached as she listened. The lies, the manipulation, it was all designed to prey on Maya's trust. You're doing great, Maya, Rachel said gently. Take your time. He took me to his house, Maya continued. There were other people there. They talked about selling me. I heard them say I was valuable. Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes again. Officer Daniels nodded, his expression grim but patient. Thank you for telling us, Maya. You're very brave. We're going to make sure no one ever hurts you again. As the questioning continued, another officer entered the room with a phone in hand. We've contacted her mother, he said to Officer Daniels. She's on her way. Maya's eyes lit up for the first time. My mom? She asked, her voice trembling with hope. Yes, the officer confirmed. She'll be here soon. Rachel knelt beside Maya, her smile warm. See? You're not alone anymore. Your mom's coming to get you. Maya's tears flowed freely, but this time, they were tears of relief. For the first time in weeks, she felt the faint stirrings of safety in love. As Maya waited for her mother, Rachel stepped outside the room to collect herself. The adrenaline that had kept her focused during the flight was beginning to fade, replaced by the emotional weight of what had just happened. She thought about how easily Maya's plea for help could have been missed, how close the young girl had come to disappearing forever. Rachel took a deep breath. This was why she did her job, not just to serve drinks or calm nervous flyers, but to be a protector, a shield for those who couldn't defend themselves. When she returned to the room, Maya was sitting quietly, her small hands still clutching her backpack. Rachel sat beside her, offering a comforting presence. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but Maya was no longer facing it alone. The minutes felt like hours as Rachel and Officer Daniels stayed with Maya in the small room. Outside, the terminal buzzed with activity, but inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Maya sat quietly, her fingers still clutching the straps of her backpack as if letting go would make the safety she had found disappear. Rachel stayed close, offering quiet reassurance. Your mom will be here soon, she said gently. She's probably running as fast as she can to get to you. Maya gave a small nod, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety. What if she's mad at me, she whispered. For leaving with him? Rachel's heart broke at the question. Oh, sweetie, no, she said. Your mom is going to be so happy to see you. She's been looking for you this whole time. None of this is your fault. Before Maya could respond, the door to the room opened, and a woman's voice broke through the stillness. Maya. Maya looked up, her eyes widening as a woman rushed into the room. She was in her mid-30s, her hair disheveled from running, and tears streamed down her face. Mom! Maya cried, leaping out of her seat. They collided in a tight embrace, Maya's sobs muffled against her mother's chest. I was so scared, Maya choked out. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. Her mother, Angela, held her tighter. You're safe now, she whispered through her tears. You're safe, and that's all that matters. Rachel watched the scene, her own eyes misting. She had been part of countless emotional moments in her years as a flight attendant, but nothing compared to seeing a family reunited after such a harrowing ordeal. After the initial flood of emotion subsided, Angela turned to the officers and Rachel, her gratitude palpable. Thank you, she said, her voice shaking. Thank you for saving my daughter. Officer Daniels nodded. We're glad she's safe. But we'll need to ask you a few questions to piece everything together. Angela sat beside Maya, her hand never leaving her daughter's. I don't know how this happened, Angela began. 2 weeks ago, Maya disappeared after school. I thought someone had taken her. I went to the police, but they said there weren't enough leads to go on. Her voice broke, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. I tried everything, posting flyers, calling everyone I could think of, but no one knew where she was. And then, nothing. It was like she vanished. Maya glanced at her mother, guilt flickering across her face. "I thought Greg was your friend," she said quietly. "He said you needed me." Angela's expression darkened. "Greg? I don't even know anyone named Greg." Maya's eyes widened. "He lied about everything." Rachel knelt beside Maya. "It's not your fault," she said firmly. "You couldn't have known. What matters is that you spoke up when it mattered most." Officer Daniels listened carefully, making notes as Angela spoke. "Greg has a history of targeting young girls," he explained. "We've been tracking his activities for a while, but this is the first time we've caught him red-handed. Maya's bravery is going to help us put him away for a long time." Angela's grip on Maya's hand tightened. "You'll make sure he can't hurt anyone else, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We will," Daniels assured her. "Greg's already in custody, and with Maya's testimony, we'll have everything we need to build a strong case." As the conversation shifted to logistics, Angela turned to Rachel. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said. "You saved my daughter's life." Rachel shook her head modestly. "Maya saved herself," she said. "She's the one who had the courage to reach out for help. I just did what anyone would do." Angela's eyes filled with tears again. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You noticed her, you listened, and you acted. You're a hero." Rachel felt a lump rise in her throat. "I was just in the right place at the right time," she said softly. But deep down, she felt a surge of pride, knowing she had made a difference. By the time the officers finished their questioning, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The fear that had gripped Maya and Angela was giving way to relief. They were together again, and Greg was no longer a threat. As Rachel prepared to leave, Maya stood and hugged her tightly. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice muffled against Rachel's shoulder. "Thank you for saving me." Rachel smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're so brave, Maya," she said. "Never forget that." As Rachel stepped out of the room, she took a deep breath. The day had been harrowing, but knowing Maya was safe and back with her mother made every moment worth it. She had witnessed the worst and the best of humanity that day, and the best had won. As Maya and her mother reunited, the weight of the past 2 weeks began to unfold. Officer Daniels and his team moved quickly, taking statements from Angela and Maya while collecting evidence to build their case against Greg. The atmosphere in the room was tense but determined. Everyone involved understood the importance of getting to the bottom of what had happened. Maya sat at a small table beside her mother, clutching her backpack as she spoke hesitantly about her ordeal. Rachel stayed nearby, her presence offering Maya a sense of comfort. "I didn't want to go with him," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he said you were hurt, Mom. He said you needed me." Angela's hands trembled as she held her daughter's. "I would never send anyone to get you," she said firmly, tears filling her eyes. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Officer Daniels leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. "Maya, can you tell us what happened after you went with Greg?" Maya nodded hesitantly. "He took me to his house. There were other people there, and they kept saying things like, 'She's a good one' and 'She'll fetch a high price.' I didn't know what they meant at first, but then I heard Greg on the phone. He said someone was coming to buy me." Angela gasped, pulling Maya closer. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No one will ever hurt you again." Officer Daniels exchanged a grim glance with his partner. "Maya, you did the right thing by giving Rachel that note. Because of you, we can stop Greg and the people he's working with." As Maya spoke, Rachel listened carefully, piecing together the timeline. Greg's actions weren't random, he had clearly planned this, targeting Maya specifically. But the question of why still lingered. Why her? Was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, or was there something more? Officer Daniels received a call during the questioning and stepped out of the room. When he returned, his expression was grim. "We've searched Greg's property," he said. "We found records, names, locations, and transactions. He's part of a larger trafficking ring. Maya wasn't the only girl he's taken." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Maya's hands gripped her mother's tightly, her small frame trembling. Angela's voice was firm despite her fear. "You have to stop them. All of them." Daniels nodded. "We will. Thanks to Maya, we have enough to bring Greg down and go after his network. This is a big break in the case." As the officers finalized their notes, Rachel knelt beside Maya. "You're incredibly brave," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Because of you, a lot of other kids are going to be safe." Maya looked at her, her eyes wide. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone would help me." Rachel's heart ached at the girl's words. "You were scared, but you still did something. That's what makes you brave." Angela squeezed her daughter's hand. "Rachel's right. You're the strongest person I know." As the officers prepared to escort Angela and Maya home, Rachel stepped aside with Officer Daniels. "What's going to happen to Greg?" she asked. "He's in custody, and with the evidence we've gathered, he's facing serious charges," Daniels replied. "But we're also using this case to dismantle the trafficking network he's connected to. It's a long process, but this is a huge step." Rachel nodded, relief washing over her. "I'm glad Maya spoke up. She saved herself, and so many others." Daniels smiled faintly. "And you saved her. Without your quick thinking, she might not have had the chance." As Rachel walked back to the room, she found Angela hugging Maya tightly, both of them looking visibly lighter despite the emotional weight of the day. Maya turned to Rachel and ran over, wrapping her arms around her. "Thank you," Maya said, her voice muffled against Rachel's shoulder. "For everything." Rachel knelt to meet Maya's gaze. "You're welcome, sweetheart. But you're the real hero here." Angela approached, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You've given me my daughter back." Rachel smiled, her voice soft. "Just take care of her. That's all the thanks I need." As Maya and Angela left with the officers, Rachel stood alone in the terminal, her heart full. The day had been harrowing, but seeing Maya safe and reunited with her mother made every moment worth it. She had played a role in bringing light to a dark situation, and that was something she would carry with her forever. The days following Maya's rescue were a whirlwind of activity. The authorities worked tirelessly to piece together the full extent of Greg's crimes and his involvement in the trafficking ring. For Rachel, the experience lingered in her mind, every detail of Maya's fear, her bravery, and the moment she handed over that life-saving note. Though Rachel had returned to her usual flight schedule, she remained in contact with Officer Daniels, checking on Maya's well-being and staying updated on the case. In the days after his arrest, Greg was interrogated by law enforcement. At first, he denied everything, claiming that Maya had misunderstood his intentions. "I was helping her," he insisted, his tone defiant. But as the evidence piled up, bank records, phone logs, and statements from other victims, Greg's lies began to crumble. Faced with overwhelming proof, he finally broke. During a tense interview, Greg revealed names of others involved in the trafficking ring, as well as locations of safe houses used to hide victims. His confession opened the door to a series of coordinated raids, where law enforcement rescued several other children who had been reported missing. Though Maya had been through more than any child should ever endure, she agreed to help the investigation. With her mother by her side, she gave a detailed statement to the police about her time in Greg's custody. Her testimony not only confirmed the timeline of events but also provided critical insight into how Greg and his accomplices operated. During the process, Maya was assigned a victim advocate, someone trained to help children navigate the complexities of the justice system. The advocate worked with her to ensure she felt safe and supported as she shared her story. Rachel, too, was mentioned in the investigation as a key figure who had acted swiftly to save Maya. Her actions were praised by law enforcement, and she was invited to a debriefing where she learned more about the broader implications of what had happened. One afternoon, Rachel received a call from Angela. "Maya would like to see you," Angela said. "She talks about you all the time. You really made an impact on her." Rachel's heart swelled. "Of course," she replied. "I'd love to see her." They arranged to meet at a nearby park, a quiet and safe location where Maya could relax. When Rachel arrived, she saw Maya sitting on a bench with her sketchbook open, drawing intently. Angela sat beside her, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. "Maya," Angela said softly, nudging her. "Look who's here." Maya's face lit up when she saw Rachel. She jumped up and ran to her, wrapping her arms around Rachel's waist. "I missed you," she exclaimed. Rachel knelt to hug her back. "I missed you too, sweetheart. How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Maya said. "I still get scared sometimes, but Mom says we're safe now. And I've been drawing a lot. It helps." Rachel smiled. "I'd love to see your drawings." Maya eagerly showed her the sketchbook, flipping through pages filled with colorful images of flowers, animals, and even a few drawings of people. One page, in particular, caught Rachel's eye, a sketch of an airplane with a small girl sitting by the window and a flight attendant standing beside her. Below it, Maya had written, "Thank you for saving me." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. "This is beautiful, Maya," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're so talented." As they sat together in the park, Rachel and Angela talked while Maya continued to draw. Angela expressed her gratitude again, sharing how the experience had brought her and Maya closer than ever. "I've learned not to take a single moment for granted," Angela said. "Every day with her feels like a gift." Rachel nodded, understanding completely. "Maya's strength is incredible," she said. "And so is yours. You're an amazing mom." As the sun began to set, Angela turned to Rachel. "We've been invited to attend the sentencing hearing for Greg," she said. "Maya wants to go. She says it'll help her feel like she's taking back control. But I'm nervous." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on Angela's arm. "I think that's a brave choice," she said. "And if you want, I'll be there too. You won't have to face it alone." Angela smiled, her eyes filling with gratitude. "That means so much to us. Thank you." As Rachel left the park that evening, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. She had stepped into Maya's life at a critical moment, and now she was watching the young girl rebuild her world piece by piece. But there was still one final chapter to this story, the day Greg would face justice. Rachel resolved to be there for Maya and Angela when that day came, ready to support them as they closed this painful chapter of their lives. Together, they would see it through to the end. The day of Greg's sentencing had arrived, and the courtroom was packed with law enforcement officers, victim advocates, and a handful of reporters. Maya sat in the front row beside her mother, Angela, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the nerves she felt inside. Angela kept a protective arm around her daughter, whispering quiet reassurances. Rachel, true to her promise, was there as well. She sat a few seats behind Maya and Angela, her presence a steady source of comfort. Watching Maya sit so bravely in a room filled with people brought a swell of pride to Rachel's chest. This young girl had endured so much, and yet, here she was, ready to confront the man who had tried to steal her future. Greg was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. His usually confident demeanor was gone. Instead, he looked disheveled and defeated. Maya's gaze briefly flicked toward him before she quickly looked away, her jaw tightening. Angela noticed her daughter's discomfort and squeezed her hand reassuringly. When Greg was seated, the judge entered the room and began the proceedings. The charges were read aloud, each one painting a clearer picture of the horrors Greg had inflicted on his victims. Human trafficking, child endangerment, fraudulent impersonation. The list went on, and each charge carried the weight of the lives he had tried to destroy. As part of the sentencing hearing, the judge invited victims to make statements. Maya had insisted on speaking, despite Angela's initial hesitation. With the help of her advocate, she had prepared a short statement about her experience and the impact it had on her life. When Maya's name was called, she stood, her legs trembling slightly. Angela walked with her to the podium, offering silent support. Rachel leaned forward in her seat, her heart aching for the brave young girl. Maya took a deep breath and began. "My name is Maya, and I'm 12 years old," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. 2 weeks ago, Greg took me away from my mom and made me feel like I didn't matter. He lied to me, and he tried to hurt me. But he didn't win. I'm here today because people cared about me, my mom, the flight attendants, and the police. They helped me feel safe again. Her voice faltered slightly, but she pressed on. What Greg did was wrong, and I hope he never gets the chance to hurt anyone else. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before the judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Maya," he said. "Your bravery is remarkable." Maya returned to her seat, her head held high. Angela wrapped her arms around her, tears streaming down her face. "You were amazing," she whispered after the victim's statements. The judge delivered Greg's sentence. He was given the maximum penalty for his crimes, decades in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, a collective sense of relief washed over the room. For Maya, it was a moment of closure. She knew Greg could no longer hurt her or anyone else, and that knowledge lifted a heavy burden from her heart. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone brightly, a stark contrast to the heavy emotions inside. Maya stood with Angela and Rachel, her hand still gripping her mother's. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, crouching to meet Maya's eyes. Maya nodded. "I think so," she said. "It feels good to know he can't hurt anyone anymore." Rachel smiled. "That's because of you, Maya. You were brave enough to speak up and make sure he was stopped." Angela added, "You've inspired so many people, sweetie. Including me." As they prepared to leave, Maya handed Rachel a small envelope. "I made something for you," she said shyly. Rachel opened it to find a drawing of an airplane with the words "Thank you for saving me" written in bold letters. Her throat tightened as she looked at Maya. "This is beautiful," she said. "I'm going to keep this forever." Maya smiled, a flicker of confidence returning to her face. "I'm going to keep drawing," she said. "Maybe one day, I'll make pictures that help people feel brave." Rachel nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "I think you already do." As Rachel watched Maya and Angela walk away, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been harrowing, but it had also been a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Maya's courage, Angela's unwavering love, and the collective efforts of everyone involved had turned what could have been a tragedy into a story of hope and justice. For Rachel, it was a reminder that even small actions, like listening to a scared little girl on a flight, could change lives. She walked away from the courthouse that day with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she had been part of something truly extraordinary. This story is a powerful reminder of how courage and quick action can make a world of difference. Maya's bravery, Rachel's compassion, and the determination of everyone involved turned a terrifying situation into a story of hope and justice. It's incredible to see how even in the darkest moments, people can come together to protect and support each other. If this story inspired you as much as it inspired me, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.